Today, we are talking about how to find, vet, and hire great freelancers. And for Andrea and I, this has been a focus for us for a really long time. So, some background on us. Andrea and I actually met, I always mix up the timeline, but about 10 or 12 years ago now. Andrea was the CMO at a company called Campaign Monitor, and I was her head of marketing on the self-service side. And when we were at that business, we actually powered a lot of our marketing initiatives through freelancers. So we hired a ton of content writers, social media, designers, a lot of different freelancers, a lot of different resources to fulfill a lot of different projects. So not only do we have experience hiring and building teams out at bigger companies and, finding the right freelancers for the right roles, but since then, and even before for Andrea, and I'll let her go into her background in a second, but we have 30 plus years combined experience in service-based businesses, right? So when we left that company, we actually went out and built our own, what we call a boutique consulting firm. And at that boutique consulting firm, we also hired freelancers. So we were freelancers ourselves, we were delivering work to clients, and we hired a lot of designers and writers and marketers and social media experts, et cetera, to help us grow that business. So over time, Andrea and I have been part of hiring hundreds of freelancers. We have been freelancers that have been hired ourselves. We've helped people hire, senior freelancers, beginning freelancers, kind of everything in between, every seniority level. And today, we are the co-founders of a platform called Harlow. So we are a media services and product company specifically for freelancers and creators and solopreneurs to help them build and grow their businesses. As part of that, we actually have a full job board component. So, still to this day, Andrea and I are helping businesses, freelancers, whoever it is that's hiring those subcontractors, freelancers, find the right people to grow their business. So, it's been kind of an ongoing compounding effort on our end. Hiring freelancers over the years in all of these different ways. So we have spent the time and energy and have made the mistakes and have figured it out along the way. And we're really excited to share that with you today. And Andrea, I will let you add to that any background on you or where we've been.
Yeah, no, I think that was a great intro. I think the role of freelancers has changed a lot in organizations over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And more I see larger organizations really leaning on freelancers, or if you want to call them contractors or consultants, whatever language fits for you, in order to supplement their existing team and give them more kind of firepower within their organization. So yeah, just excited to chat today and share some of the best practices that we've seen along the way as Samantha said, as we've been hiring, and we still support our clients with hiring,
Yep.
as well as we get hired, right? We're still freelancers ourselves.
Yeah, and I love that specific call out, Andrea, because as someone who's hiring freelancers, whether you're hiring freelancers today, whether you've hired freelancers in the past, whether you hired freelancers 8 to 10 years ago, the connotation behind it has shifted, right? I remember when Andrew and I were first hiring freelancers at Campaign Monitor, and people were like, that's crazy. There's no way that you can bring in people that aren't directly tied into the company and that they're going to do a good job and understand how to tell our story and be able to be really contributing members of the team. And over time, that connotation has shifted, right? Now I think more and more people understand that this is actually the viable way to grow a business in most circumstances, right? And we'll get into kind of like when to hire a freelancer versus a full-time versus maybe an agency in a little bit. But the truth is that more and more people are embracing this. Almost every organization that you see now is hiring freelancers at some level for something, right? And I personally, obviously being deeply ingrained here, love to see it and love to see that shifting.
Yeah, I'll say you're seeing with that, we're just seeing like um, a lot more freelancers on the market, a lot more variety of skill sets offered, and seniority levels as well, which I think is really exciting.
100%. Like this world is just like expanding rapidly. More and more people are working for themselves and taking that power into their own hands. So like I mentioned, today we're going to go over when to hire a freelancer versus full-time versus agency, right? Because the truth is that each of these kind of hiring methods plays a different role, and you should be really thoughtful with who you're hiring and why. We're going to talk about writing job descriptions that actually attract the right people. I think this is a major issue that we see across the board is that people just are not being specific enough about what they need and why to attract the right people. We're going to talk about vetting, interviewing, and actually hiring the right people and how you set that up for success from the beginning and building those long-term high impact relationships, right? Most of us, when we hire people, the intent is that it works out long term and that we're not constantly having to hire somebody, onboard them, offboard them, hire somebody, onboard, offboard, right? So we're going to go over how to actually keep those relationships intact and make sure it's working from both sides. I kind of just touched on this a little bit, but why this matters so much, especially today, right? I talk to a lot of people hiring freelancers, a lot of small businesses, medium-sized businesses, even enterprise companies. And what I hear from a lot of hiring managers or even people at the senior level is I've had mixed results with freelancers, right? Which is normal. In reality, we all have mixed results with any team members or freelancers or anyone that we hire, right? Because it's all about finding the right people and making sure that you're doing that and doing the upfront work to make sure that you're finding the right people. So just kind of like lay the landscape here, usually, like I said, the real problem is usually the hiring and matching process, right? The upfront finding the right person. It's really hard. It's very challenging. We get that. There's a lot of vague job posts out there that attract the wrong candidates from the start or attract mass candidates, right? That are really hard to sift through. A lot of people are in a rush. So they speed through interviews, they miss red flags, they're not doing the due diligence up front to really vet somebody. There's a lot of unclear expectations out there, right? I know that I've done this in the past. Andrea's done this in the past. I'm sure some of you are shaking your head because you've probably done this in the past. But a lot of times when we don't do the work up front to actually figure out what we want from that person and what the outcomes are to be successful, it's going to be a mismatch, right? Unclear expectations. And overall, you know, Andrea and I might be slightly biased, obviously, because we have a community of really, really talented, great freelancers. But there are so many great freelancers out there, right? Like I personally know hundreds of incredible freelancers in different roles. You just need the right framework and strategy to make sure you're finding those people.
Yep. Okay, so when should you actually hire a freelancer versus maybe an agency or a full-time employee? Let's start with a full-time employee because I think that's a little bit more clear, which
Mhm.
is, look, this is if you really need somebody that is going to be available and responsible kind of at all times during their working hours, right? If you need them in meetings every single day, if you need to be able to Slack them and get an immediate response, if you need them to be like deeply invested in the company long term. And it's not a clear like project-based work, right? It evolves on the day-to-day. That's really more of a full-time role versus a freelancer or an agency, which I think there's like the freelancer and agency is kind of squishy,
Mhm.
right? Samantha and I are technically view ourselves as freelancers, but with our freelancing company, it's just the two of us. We call ourselves a boutique agency. So I'll say like a freelancer is definitely better where you have a more scoped project, clearly defined outcomes. You're okay with a little bit more flexibility in your working hours and speed to start matters, right? You typically freelancers are very skilled in a specific area and they're going to come in and just hit the ground running. And they're very accustomed to working with organizations. Agencies are really kind of similar. It just depends on the type of agency, right? Like I said, Samantha and I would call ourselves an agency, but we act more like a freelancer. I will say probably the biggest thing here of when to hire a freelancer that I've seen lately comes down to budget. Most organizations right now just don't have the headcount for a full-time employee. And so that's why we see them really leaning towards agencies and freelancers. And I will say, if that's a situation that you're in, Sam will get to this in a minute, we just really need to make sure that we're setting the expectations correctly because a lot of freelancers aren't actually going to be available to be in your meetings every single day and be as responsive as a full-time employee would.
Yes, absolutely. A couple of things to add there. I mean, I think even with a full-time employee, people should have boundaries and respect those boundaries
Yeah.
clearly. And Andrea and I have been in situations before where the expectations are also really high on joining last minute meetings and things like that. But for the freelancer and agency, these are usually people who have very specialized skill sets, right? So they can come in, they can get a job done. They, are not more, I mean, some freelancers are more like generalist, but, it is really somebody who is going to be able to hit the ground running and help you solve a problem almost immediately, right? So for Andrea and I, for example, a lot of the projects that I work on from a freelance perspective, or like Andrea said, how we kind of refer to ourselves as a small agency. A lot of the times I'm going into an organization, I'm auditing what's there with a fresh set of eyes and perspective. That's another big perk of hiring a freelancer, right? Is that you get somebody who's not been so in the weeds of the business and what's going on that they can come in and offer a fresh perspective. Also, that's been influenced by their other clients and their experience, right? And we can't always bring in new full-time employees when we need a fresh perspective, but you can always bring in a freelancer or agency when you need someone to dig deeper, see things from a fresh perspective, right? So a lot of times we'll go in, audit what exists, create a new strategy, and start executing against it, right? And that's kind of like the perk of a freelancer, right? Fresh perspective. They can come in to find the strategy for you, take it off your plate, own it, run with it. So I think a lot of this here, again, and we're going to talk about this, comes down to the outcome that you're looking for, what your expectations are around communication and availability, and like how specialized of a skill set you need, and whether that specialized skill set is needed short term or long term for, years and years and years. Okay. One of the most important pieces from the very beginning, right, is writing a job description that actually works. So Andrew and I see this every day. We run a job board for freelancers and we see what's good and what's bad, right? And we've seen other companies hire freelancers and we see what's good or what's bad, right? Here's what doesn't work. Vague titles, marketing help needed. That is not specific. Marketing is so broad, right? Even when you say content help needed, design help needed, what type of marketing work? What type of design work? What type of content work, right? Like I said, a lot of freelancers have different specialized skill sets, so you need to be super specific here. Long text descriptions with no structure, right? You're throwing something in Claude or Chat GPT, it's spitting something out, you're immediately posting it, right? We need to be more specific here. We need to be careful. We need to be thoughtful, not listing a rate or listing a rate that says depends on experience, right? A lot of freelancers, this is their full-time career. They are doing this for a living. They want to understand what your budget is and what you can pay them and why that budget exists, right? What value you're putting on this work. No mention of timeline or project scope. When someone's reading your job description, they want to understand, when you're looking to hire, when the project is going to kick off, what your expectations are. And overall, like those generic requirements, if you're writing a generic job post, it's not going to attract the right people, or it's going to attract, in the elements, the wrong people, right? Because you're not being super specific. So you're going to end up with all of these candidates that are not right for the role because you're not letting them self-select, right? And the other thing here is no clear deliverables or success metrics. If you're setting up a job role, whatever it is, whether it's full-time or for an agency or for a freelancer, and you're not saying what success looks like, everybody is set up to fail, right? And Andrea, I'll let you go into what actually works and what to include here.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of the opposite, right?
Yep.
Specificity all the way around. Really clearly defining the scope of the project, what the exact deliverables are, what is the measure of success, what are your expectations for this person? Are you expecting that they're going to be available every day of the week during a specific time frame? Are you expecting to have weekly check-ins, daily check-ins? What your process is, all of that, and some of the context so they understand the why behind why you're looking for this particular individual. All of this stuff helps give the freelancer a frame of reference to understand if they're actually going to be appropriate and a good fit for this role. And obviously, I think the biggest thing for the freelancer is pay
Yep.
pay range. And we see this a lot. where jobs get posted and there's no pay. And then when it comes down to it, it's a, $15 an hour, $20 an hour job, and you have somebody quite senior who's actually considering that. So just being transparent about that up front, it really builds a lot of goodwill with the freelancer, to be honest. And it just sets expectations. It saves your time. So you're not getting candidates in that aren't even willing to work for that amount of money.
Exactly. I think like worst case scenario is you find a brilliant freelancer who you really connect with and you want in this role, and then you're in final negotiations in the contract stage and you realize you're thousands of dollars apart in
Yeah.
what you have budgeted and what they are proposing to you, right? So putting that pay up front, I know that this is like, rate transparency is relatively new in the world, right? Like for a long time, it was depends on experience, negotiable, these things, but it really does save so much time for both the freelancer and for the person hiring, right? Like, again, you don't want to end up with 50 candidates who are all above what you've budgeted for this role, right? And if you set out to hire a freelancer and you have not budgeted, that's a place to be thoughtful far in advance, right? If you're hiring a writer, if you're hiring a senior marketing specialist, if you're hiring like a fractional go-to-market person, you need to understand what your budget allows up front so that you can be really transparent with that person. Obviously, I'm very passionate about pay transparency. And Andrew and I work, anyone who posts on the job board, anyone who comes to us, even clients that come to us that are looking to hire people, we always start with, okay, what is your budget for this role? And what does that allow in terms of seniority? What are the outcomes that we are trying to create? Does that budget and that seniority level match with the outcome that we are looking for, right? It is like a strategic, thoughtful process that needs to happen up front. Vetting and interviewing. I'll go over kind of the red flags here, Andrea.
Right.
I'll play bad cop, you play good cop.
Great.
Um, so another thing here. So once you've created the job description, you've done a good job, you have listed transparent rate, you're talking to candidates who are hopefully self-selecting and, good fits, good potential fits for this role. When you are talking to freelancers, agencies, whoever it is, these are the red flags to watch out for, right? These are things to keep top of mind as you're talking to people. If somebody can't explain the process that they're going to go through to fulfill your project, or can't explain how they are going to make decisions, what they're going to look at, if they're being vague, that's a red flag, right? That means that this person may have not done this before, and you need to dig deeper there, right? A career freelancer, somebody who is good at their job, somebody who executes on this for a number of companies, is going to be able to tell you what their process is, what it looks like, even communication expectations, right? They're going to have all that information to deliver to you so that you feel comfortable. On the same breath of that, can articulate the value they provide, right? There are some freelancers who are directly leaving the corporate world and going to the freelance world, and maybe they don't have a ton of like freelance experience. That's not necessarily a red flag, but they do need to be able to articulate the value and outcome that they have provided at either different organizations or for different clients, right? So, for example, I do a lot of go-to-market consulting. So I help companies get their businesses off the ground, go from 0 to 1, 1 to 2. And I can articulate that I've done this at a number of different companies, right? Like I have testimonials in my back pocket that I can pull up when chatting with you. Oh, you want to know where else I've done this? Here's the company. Here's the space that they were in. Here's exactly what I did. Here's where we ended up. Here's who else was involved, right? So somebody should be able to tell you their story and make sure that they're a match for what you need. On that same note, hesitancy to share references or past work, right? Like most freelancers, or if not all freelancers, should have either past clients or past bosses or peers that they can connect you to, just so you can vet that yes, they have had this experience, they have had these outcomes, people have enjoyed working with them, it's been really easy and clear. When somebody sends over a generic proposal, so I do a lot of coaching with freelancers as well. We're really involved in all sides of this. I would never recommend somebody send over a generic proposal, right? That proposal should be tailored to the role that you are posting about, and it should be talking about your pain points specifically and how they are going to help fulfill those. And again, that just means that you're working with a thoughtful freelancer, right? Someone who cares about your project is going to do a good job fulfilling it. And poor communication, right? I think this is kind of like a red flag that we're all aware of. But if somebody is really difficult to talk to schedule in the early phases, that is likely an indicator that they are going to be difficult to communicate with in the later phases too.
Yeah, and I will say on the red flag, as you're interviewing candidates and talking to them, if you have a gut feeling, if there is like a moment where you're like, yeah, I don't know about that, well, maybe I can overlook it.
Mhm.
I would recommend to try and not overlook it. Trust your gut. I think
In
so
there.
many, yeah, so many times. I mean, on both sides of it, right? As a freelancer and as on the client side, hiring freelancers. Um, Samantha and I have been like, oh, well, yeah, we're worried about this. Oh, it'll be fine. And then usually it is something that floats back up, right?
Mhm.
So definitely listen to your gut on those things. So what should you be looking for? You should be looking for candidates that can understand the pain that you're having or the problem that you're trying to solve, and they can then ladder up their services or offering to that pain point and clearly articulate the value and then tie that value also to their pricing structure. So a lot of times I know it's so much easier for us on the hiring side to just understand what's an hourly rate, right? Like, well, tell me your hourly rate and then kind of like get that gut feel. Does that seem to make sense based on their seniority? Many freelancers tend to price on a project base or retainer base. And they should be able to articulate why they charge that way and the value that you're getting from them being engaged at a project on a project or on retainer versus hourly. Right. So I think that's something really to look for, depending on the size of the project, and the size of your budget. They,
One thing I will
yeah.
add on that specifically, Andrea, is I've had a lot of conversations about this recently about hiring people at an hourly rate, project rate, retainer rate. And I will tell you, as somebody who has hired a lot of freelancers, who does a lot of freelancing and consulting work, who helps other companies hire freelancers, manage their budgets, etc. Hourly rate sounds nice because it's really tangible and we can like see it very clearly. But I will tell you, when it comes down to managing your budget, with consistency, actually bringing on somebody under a retainer or project-based rate is actually so much simpler, especially if they can articulate the value that they're providing, right? Like I will tell you, I have been in the scenario where I brought somebody on at an hourly rate and we go way over scope without me even realizing it. And all of a sudden, someone that I had budgeted, $3,500 for is now a $6,000 monthly bill. And that feels bad, right? So if you can come to terms with a freelancer and say, okay, my budget's $3,500, what can you deliver within that scope? Then come back to you can set expectations. You're also managing your budget better, you're managing your cash flow better. It is really, honestly, in my mind, just a really smart decision.
Yeah, I totally agree. Especially if you've got the deliverables very clearly articulated,
Mhm.
that is by far like the best way to manage a freelancer. They should absolutely be able to give you referrals, kind of on demand, right? That should be no question. Can they give you a referral or somebody to talk to? They should, to Sam's point earlier, they should also be able to proactively explain to you how they work. So this is not only like how they approach the type of work that you're looking for, whether it's project management, some sort of marketing or development, like what their professional approach is, but then also what is their approach as a freelancer, right? When are they available to work? What is their capacity? What do the check-ins look like? How they typically sign up, structure contracts, things like that. This is something we didn't even put down here, but something definitely to be looking for at this part, of the process as you're interviewing is like, what are contract terms? How do they typically get paid? Are those in line with the way that my organization is structured? And is this going to work? You know, right now, a lot of larger companies are, net 60 payment terms and totally get it. But that's rough for a freelancer. So is that like non-negotiable, non-starter right there? It's better to just work that stuff out right now.
Absolutely. 100%. I think so. Even outside of, when you're vetting, when you're looking at candidates, when you're writing that upfront job description, and we covered a little bit of this like through what we were talking about during the hiring process, but a few additional things that you really need to make sure that you're focusing on is again defining success before you start, right? So even before you create your budget, before you decide who you're going to hire, before you decide whether they're full-time, freelance, or an agency, like you really need to understand what success of this position looks like, right? What does the outcome look like at 30, 60, 90 days? You need to share that with people during the process. It should not be a surprise to them, right? This should be shared upfront. I think it should be shared in the job description. I think it should also be iterated during the process so that somebody completely understands. Yes, I do think I can get there in 30 days. Yes, I think within 2 months, that is a reasonable expectation, right? And this might get debated during the hiring process, depending on who you're hiring and what perspective they come in with. That's okay. But having some semblance here, I think is really important. Another really great trick to have up your sleeve is a paid test project. So I have seen a ton of people doing this recently, and I actually just last year did this for one of my consulting clients, right? They're like, yes, you sound, you look great on paper. You sound great in the interview process. I think you know exactly what you're talking about, but I would love to have you audit this thing, bring me your point of view, and kind of guide me through your thought process just to make sure that we're aligned on how we want to handle this specific channel. Somebody hired me on board for like a $7,000 test project to see if they wanted to hire me for, a $10,000, $12,000 a month contract. That was perfectly fine with me, right? I was like, great, I think this is smart on both sides. I can understand how you work, what your communication styles are, what your expectations are. You can understand my point of view, my depth of knowledge. So just a really smart thing to potentially do. You can do this with writers, you can do this with designers, you can do this with marketers, social media marketers, whoever it is. If you're really feeling like a little bit unsure if this person is the right person, bring them on for a month, pay them for a month, set the expectations around that. It's a great way to get to know each other. And then I will say another really important thing is like setting expectations in writing, right? So we can talk about it, we can tell somebody when we're having like a one-on-one conversation, things can get lost in translation, right? Somebody can misinterpret something. So I always, 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 right? Include it in the job description, have the conversation around it, and then reiterate it through writing that these are your expectations, right? Whether it's timeline, deliverables, revisions, payment terms, communication expectations, whatever it is, write it down. Then both you and the person that you're hiring, whatever role they're in, are really aligned. And alignment is key.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there on setting expectations. Specifically when it comes to your contract, also always make sure you have an appropriate out in your contract. So, what does it look like if you decide during the middle of this project, for whatever reason, this isn't the right fit? Perhaps there's like big changes within the organization. All of a sudden, the priorities have shifted. Always make sure that you have an appropriate exit clause in your contracts with your freelancers. So everybody's very clear. Is it a 2 weeks notice? Is it a three, is it a month notice? What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, that has saved Andrea and I numerous times on both sides, right?
Yeah.
On both the hiring freelancer side and being hired as freelancers. Like, even if you do all of these things, even if you do everything right and you find the right person, like I said, and like Andrea said, circumstances can change, right? So having that exit clause and making it really clear protects everybody, right? You
Yeah.
want to protect your budget and your initiatives and the outcomes that you're trying to get to. A freelancer is also doing this work as their livelihood, right? So they also want to like understand their income and their earnings and not be caught off guard. It really just it saves everybody in those really tough scenarios. Okay. Also, building a long-term relationship, right? So I mentioned this up front. I think the last thing that all of us want to do as people hiring, again, whether it's full-time, freelance, or agency, is hire, onboard, offboard. Hire, onboard, offboard. It's exhausting, right? It is a lot of work. And so one of the things that Andrew and I talk about a lot is building long-term relationships and what that looks like. And I honestly, I work on this with freelancers and I work on it with people hiring freelancers, right? A lot of this is around alignment and consistency and communication, right? So the likelihood of you hiring a freelancer and everything being able to be async is very unlikely. right? You need those check-ins, you need those face-to-face, whether it's a weekly or bi-weekly sync, just to prevent misalignment, to get them the information that they need, and also to build the relationship, right? I think a lot of times when people are hiring freelancers, there is, I don't know, some sort of perspective that I don't know I can put like a name on right now, Andrea, and maybe you can like do a better job at this of me. But that person is your partner, right? They are somebody who is highly skilled, who's coming to do a very specific job, and they should be treated as such, right? Like you should be building a relationship with the people that you're hiring, whether or not they're agencies, freelancers, or a full-time hire, right? Relationship building and the humanization of this really, really, really matters. Give feedback early and often, right? So during the first 30 days, I'll give a great example of this. I brought on a social media manager back in December to take social media off my plate. I was hitting capacity. I needed somebody else to do it. I needed someone to take accountability and ownership. In the first 30 days, I was giving feedback almost every single day. I love this. This doesn't quite sound like me. Okay, that's not quite my point of view. Here are some words that I would use instead. I gave a ton of feedback in the first 30 days, and I set expectations with this person that I would be. And now today, we're in April, that was in December. I give feedback very seldomly because we aligned so closely up front in those early months. And I set aside the time to do that, right? So be responsive, be clear, and be generous with your context and your feedback. Be kind, right? Be kind and be collaborative. Don't be harsh or critical. But it is really, really important in those early days to do that alignment. And on the other end, ask for feedback too. Same scenario here with this social media manager. I asked her multiple times, how do you want me to give feedback? Where do you want me to give feedback? What works best? Should I send voice notes? Should I send text? Should I comment on, the exact post that I'm talking about? What works best for you? And we got to a point where I very clearly understood what she wanted in terms of feedback and how she best received it. And then she received my feedback even better and was able to implement and align better, right? So again, it's about building the relationship.
Yeah, I'll say sometimes also you don't really know what you need until you start getting into it, right? Until you start this engagement with with a freelancer and you realize, oh, I'm not quite getting what I need. Okay, then what do I need to ask for instead? And maybe like we've hired somebody recently where it was like, oh, I know, I actually need just like a weekly recap of exactly what went down this week. I'm a little bit scattered right now, focusing on too many things. Can you just every Friday just shoot me a Slack with all the key things that I need to know? And that helps me better understand what they're doing and build trust between us.
I love that. I love that. I think I think those communication expectations are so important to set up front, right? And I think depending on the freelancer that you're working with and what they're focusing on, that communication is going to shift and that relationship building is going to shift. But I think regular check-ins, whether they're async, like Andrea said, whether they're in person, but just talking about what's happening, what's going down, what's being done, when are the next things being delivered, that's all very, very normal and those expectations should be set up front. I know that I already mentioned this, but I really, really want to kind of like nail this down is that you need to treat a freelancer, you need to treat an agency like a partner, right? You need to not treat them like they're like this vendor or this cold relationship over here. There needs to be respect, there needs to be, you know, honestly, like you need to thank them, you need to appreciate them, you need to give them affirmation. A lot of times these are people that are working, solo on their own. They are not getting that from a boss or a mentor. And if somebody's doing really good work, you need to tell them that they're doing really good work, right? That's how you actually keep that relationship long term. And even outside of that, looping them into context, strategy, and goals, helping them understand the holistic business, not just what their piece of it is, but what everyone else is working on and focusing on and how their piece fits into the puzzle is so important, right? Like you want this person to be a strategic partner, and the more they understand, the better. Um, Payment, obviously, this is probably, I mean, I'm going to say it out loud, even though it shouldn't be needed to say out loud, but pay on time, right? Just like you pay your full-time employees, just like you pay people that are on your actual payroll, you need to pay freelancers on time every time. If there is any mishaps around payments, you need to communicate that to them very clearly, right? You want them to be reliable with the work that they're delivering. They want you to be reliable with payment, right? So make sure that that is teed up, set up, put together whatever systems and structure you need to make sure these people are getting paid, on the timeline that you two agreed on. And I guess I already covered this, but credit and recognition, right? Even more so than thanking them and giving them affirmation and telling them that they're doing a good job, share their work publicly, right? Refer them when you can into other projects, right? Like that costs you nothing and it earns a ton of respect between you and that freelancer. And if you are, if there's a freelancer who's killing it on your team, say they're a content writer, they're creating great content, they're driving your business forward, your content is actually starting to rank organically and in AI search results and it's driving leads, you know, share that, say that, tell them that tell them that they're doing a good job. Write a testimonial for them, introduce them to somebody, right? Like a lot of people, I think, sometimes want like freelancers to be like their best kept secret, especially when they're doing really and delivering. But that person's livelihood depends on them having most of the time multiple clients, right? So do good by them.
Also, freelancers know a lot of other freelancers.
Yeah.
So this is another benefit to building a long-term relationship is if you then are looking for help in other parts of your business, typically they'll have a couple of referrals to pass your way.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of Andrew and I's, I think one of like the really sweet spots that we talk about when we get hired as freelancers and consultants. We both only take on like a couple of consulting projects at a time, but one of the big pieces of value about working with Andrew and I is that we are really well connected, right? I'm like, oh, you bring me in to work on your go-to-market. Great. I can find you a designer. I can find you a writer. I can find you a social media manager. I can find you the right PR person. I got you because I have a network. And that is true of many, many freelancers, right? So, yeah, you're not just tapping into them and their skill set, you're also tapping into their network and the team that they can bring in for you. And they're only going to do that if you're a joy to work with. So I know it was a lot. Andrea, anything else to hire there before we kind of go into job board, etc.?
Yep, I think that covers it.
Yeah. So I know a lot of you may have specific roles in mind. Maybe you don't. Maybe you're hiring today. Maybe you're planning on to hire in a couple of months. Maybe you're thinking about like your Q3 initiatives and who you're going to hire. A couple of things that we want to call out specifically for you. We do have a job board. I know that I've mentioned this a number of times, but it is an easy place. If you want to do all of this on your own, do the upfront work to actually, be thorough and be thoughtful, create the job listing. You can post it on the Harlow job board, right? And one of the great things about the job board and this community that Andrea and I have built up over the last 4 or 5 years is that these are career freelancers, right? They are good at what they do. They are motivated. They are talented. They know what clients they want to work for. They know how to self-select and vet projects, right? This is a really great niche place, especially if you're hiring for any creative roles, any operations or project management roles, any marketing roles, development, design. That is kind of like our sweet spot. So if you're hiring for any of those roles, want to do all the upfront work yourself, you can absolutely post a job to the job board and get in front of our network of 60,000 plus freelancers, right? There's 13,000 people that our newsletter goes out to every week where we highlight kind of our top jobs. We have 50,000 plus followers on social, most of them which are freelancers. We have all these different ways. We have like over 20,000 freelancers a month that come to the job board to look for new roles. So the great thing about this is that it's expansive. It gets in front of a lot of people, but those people are also the right people, right? They're the career freelancers. It's easy. You can get your job post live in minutes and you reach candidates who are actively looking and have availability. If you don't want to do this on your own, if as I'm going through this and you're like, wow, that sounds like a lot, I'm already busy, I'm at capacity, that's why I'm hiring this person in the first place to take things off of my plate. I don't have time to talk to 7, 10 freelancers, create a job description, figure out my budget, figure out who the right people are, right? If you're like, I just need someone to do this for me, we're also here for that, right? So we actually have a white glove service where you tell us what you need. We meet with you, you talk to us about who you're hiring, why, what your budget is, what the outcomes are. We actually take all of that information and we scope out the role for you, right? We say, okay, if this is your budget and these are the outcomes, this is the type of person that you can get within that budget to deliver this. And then what we do is we actually go out and we post that job for you. We put it in front of our network. If we actually have people that are connected directly to us that we can actually recommend hands-on, we do that. Outside of that, we vet every single candidate that comes in from your job post. And what we do is we actually vet those people, we talk to them, and then you receive the top five. If you want five, we deliver five. If you're like, I need two people to choose from, we deliver two, right? We work with you to figure out what you want on your end, what you have the time for, and make it happen, right? So it is fast, it is hands off. Like I said, Andrea and I have hired hundreds of freelancers. We've placed hundreds of freelancers for other people. We're good at this. We know how to create the job description. We know how to vet people. We know how to find the right people. We know how to make sure that communication expectations, all of that is aligned, right? So we've worked with people on this. And honestly, what we hear is that, 10, 20, sometimes 30 hours of time is saved by going through us instead of doing this on your own. So if you don't have 20 hours this month to put toward finding that next person, come to us. We're here to help, right? And specifically, I think this is really ideal if you have senior talent that you're looking for, if you're looking for really specialized support, or again, like a really urgent hire and you just don't have the time to do it, we can do it for you. And Andrea, I will let you add to any of that job board or white glove service.
Nope, I think you did a great job describing everything.
Awesome. Now I want to open things up for a Q&A. So any questions that have come in as we've been talking, any questions that you have, whether it's about a hire that you are currently thinking about, whether it is about someone that you're thinking about hiring in the future, if anything here was unclear, just throw it in the chat or Q&A and we'll cover it. And anything additional on your end, Andrea, anything that you want to like really drive home here, anything that you want to make sure that the crew like really, really understands.
Put me on the spot, Samantha.
I think, for me personally, I think one of the most important things here is rate transparency. I mean, I think all of these things are really, really important, but I think rate transparency is just top of the list here, right? Like when you're hiring a freelancer, you need to make sure that you're just really clear on what your budget is and what your expectations are for that budget. That is one of like the top ways that you're gonna find the right person for the right role.
Yeah, and that's just all upfront, right? It's like you need to be really clear with yourself and with your organization about exactly the deliverables and what success looks like for you as the hiring manager within the company, right?
Yep.
Because you want to make yourself look good too.
Yes. I mean, that is such a great note, Andrea. I was actually just talking to, there's a company that I consult for, and I'm a consultant, obviously, for them. And they also have a number of other consultants that help them with a specific, like we're focused on kind of like demand gen special projects, right? So we help move a lot of like big projects forward in the organization. And I was talking to one of the internal employees there, and he was like, I have a really hard time taking credit for the work that freelancers and consultants and et cetera are doing on my team and then like speaking to that work. And I was like, no, the reason that you're hiring freelancers and consultants and other people is to make you look good, right? Is to get the right visibility internally. Like that is part of the perk of hiring the right people onto your team, whether it's full time, whether it's freelance, whether it's agency,
Yeah.
right? I'm not saying to like take credit for everyone's work. Like we don't want to be arrogant. We want to be like respectful, but hiring the right freelancers, hiring the right people makes you look good. And it is supposed to make you look good, right? So the more that you can be thoughtful up front, the more that you can align, the more that you can set expectations and get the right people on your team, the better your visibility is internally, right? So this isn't something just to rush through because it does have like far more holistic impact than what you think.
Yeah, yeah. I can't overstate like how much that upfront work um plays into the success down the line, right? It all builds on each other, setting out that first job description.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know we're about 10:47 here. I'm gonna give everyone back like 10 minutes of their time. What I will say is if you were here listening today and if questions came up and you're not necessarily ready to ask them right now, or they're very specific to your organization, you don't really want to like throw them in the chat or the Q&A, Andrea and I are here to chat. Right. So we're going to send a follow-up email after this call. It'll have the recording. Feel free to share that with anybody who it's relevant to, but we will include the recording. We will include some follow-up resources. We'll include some information on the job board as well as the white glove service so you have it in hand. And if you have any questions on hiring, again, whether it's a very specific role, whether they're broader questions, even if it's like, hey, I have no idea where to start, right? Like this is a totally safe space. Andrea and I are a safe space for you. So send those over, reply to the email, get in touch with us. We'll make sure you have all the information to do so.
Right? Well, thanks everyone.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. I really appreciate y'all joining. That email will probably land in your inbox tomorrow. But in the meantime, if you need to get a hold of us, I'm Samantha at meetharlow.com. It's Andrea at meetharlow.com. You can reach out to either of us, but all of that information will land in your inbox and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.